He is the editor of All Israel News. He is a multiple New York Times best-selling author, and he is relentless in publishing new work. His new one, The Beirut Protocol, releases next month. He's an old friend of the program as well. Best-selling author Joel C. Rosenberg joining us here on Blaze TV. Joel, good to see you again, brother. How are you?
I'm doing well. Great to be with you, Steve. Thank you.
You bet. So,
shalom from Jerusalem.
Thank you very much. What is life like there right now?
It's a little tough. Our airports are closed. No foreigner can come in or out of the country, but neither can Israeli citizens. I'm an Israeli citizen. I'm a dual citizen. I joke that I'm a U.S. Israeli citizen, so I get to vote twice. It's like living in Chicago, Steve.
But, Detroit, Wayne County, or
yes,
Atlanta, or Philadelphia. Anyway, go ahead, Joel. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. No, that takes us back to November. But yes, that's a problem. Listen, COVID rates are very, very high here. We have had 3 full-on national lockdowns, and some of them have worked, some of them haven't. And we're doing well with our vaccination program. You know, if you're supportive of vaccinations, look, we've got 77% of people 50 years old and older have it already, but our rates are still going up. So it's a problem, and they're not sure how to deal with it and all these multiple strains and mutations. So the short version, Steve, is our tourism industry is dying. You know, the whole idea of coming here, if you're Jewish for Passover or Christian for Easter, none of that's happening. And it's very, very painful, and unemployment is high. And we're not like the United States where you have a whole continent and 50 different laboratories to try different strategies. We're a small country, and it's hitting us very, very hard.
What is your view, since we went there, because I do want to spend most of our time talking foreign policy, but there's been 2 leaders that I frankly, as someone that has followed COVID, the data, as much as maybe anybody in conservative media has for the last 10 months. I think Benjamin Netanyahu and Boris Johnson have gone insane, Joel, like insane, like literally insane, like to the point I'm hoping there's some ulterior motivation somewhere, because that's more comforting than the fact that they have become Prime Minister Karens, and have both inflicted on their people. Prime Minister Brexit has inflicted crazy levels of lockdowns. It's to the point that left-wing Oxford is losing their damn minds on what's going on, and attacking the conservative prime minister over it. And now what Netanyahu has done with these multiple lockdowns and everything else, both of them have gone nuts. COVID crazy, Joel.
Well, I'm not ready to say that. There's a lot of challenges that Netanyahu is facing, and of course we have another election coming up, the 4th in 2 years, March 23rd. You and I should talk again as we approach those elections. But look, people are angry at Netanyahu, and look, Netanyahu has done many things really, really well. And in full disclosure, 20 years ago, I worked for Netanyahu for several months. Now, I haven't talked to him in many years. I'm not close to him personally, but I just want to be clear about my background. I think there's many things he's done incredibly well, including the Abraham Accords, our Arab-Israeli peace deals, 4 of them just in the last 6 months or so. But people are very angry here at Netanyahu. And the only grace I would give him on this particular issue is that Israeli officials have struggled to figure out what is the right thing to do with a small country with a higher elderly population than most countries, certainly in this region, and the danger, you don't want to have survived the Holocaust and die of COVID because they weren't trying to be as careful as possible. We also have a limited number of doctors and hospital beds. You have to remember that. We're not in a full-blown war where you have field hospitals all set up. So those are just some of the reasons, and I just want to be fair to him. And we're reporting on this at our new, you mentioned All Israel News. We are covering this stuff, and we've been critical on things, including this. I'm not defending him that he's doing everything right. No, closing our airport, that's insane. Get a test, If you don't have it, then you should be able to fly. At least as a citizen, there's no reason to shut the airport down. That's a huge mistake, and I think he is going to face his toughest election ever on March 23rd because of these things.
All right, let's expand and get to foreign policy. And I thought the speech that former President Trump gave in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, back in May of 2017, I said at the time that I thought it was the best foreign policy speech any president has given in this country since 9/11. That I thought it had that it showed we had learned some lessons, and it took a while for it to permeate his administration. The Secretary of State he had at the time, Rex Tillerson, was no fan of that speech. Right. But I think what it showed was that his administration was not going to get bogged down in what has been bogging administrations down, Republican and Democrat in this country, going back to the 80s, which is how to settle the Palestinian question so that we can have peace. It appeared that the Trump administration decided to just dodge the question and essentially go to the rest of the Muslim world, and particularly the Arab world that doesn't like Iran anyway, in many places, and essentially say to them, if the Palestinian question wasn't there, what would be your other reasons why you would want to have a perpetual Cold War or perpetual threat of a hot war with Israel? And it seems as if by taking that rubric away, that thawed a lot of the ice here. Am I wrong in my read of that?
A little bit wrong, but close. Okay, a couple points. Let's take them one by one and what you said. Number one, President Trump absolutely did the right thing by going to Riyadh, the heart of the Islamic world, and laying down the law. Radical Islamism, violent extremist Islam is wrong, and it's bad for Muslims as well as for Jews and Christians and everybody else. So that was the exact right thing to say. Remember, President Obama wouldn't even say radical Islam. Hillary wouldn't say radical Islam. It's true. It's not all Islam that's the problem. It's the percentage of people who want to kill us and blow us up and nuke us. Okay, that's a problem. And Trump dealt with it, number one. So you're right about that. Number two, you're right that the Arab world increasingly sees Iran's regime as the threat, and they're realizing Israel is a part of the answer, not the problem. Okay, so Trump and his team absolutely got that right, and analytically, and then in practical terms. But the last part that you are wrong about, but I understand why. You're close, and that is the Trump team realized that the Palestinian issue is still very important to the Arab world, as it should be. Okay. But, and so remember, they spent 3.5 years designing a plan they felt was creative and compassionate to both sides, but took in the realities of the current environment. And the plan was pretty good. Not perfect, but it was pretty good. And it was detailed, 180 pages with maps. No administration in the United States has ever put out such a detailed plan. Now, why did that work? Not because the Palestinian leadership accepted it, nobody expected that they would, but because it told the Arab world, look, Trump is taking this seriously. He's put another deal on the table, another deal that the Palestinian leadership has rejected, even to look at, even to read, even to talk about. And that, combined with Trump understanding the rest of the Arab world's needs and the changing attitudes in the Arab world that I have seen firsthand because I met with all these top Arab leaders, that combination of the Palestinians rejecting a deal, even a conversation one more time, that set into motion the alliance that we are seeing emerge now. It's not just the peace deals, those are great, with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. And I think more are coming. But it's the architecture of an Israeli, American, Sunni Arab alliance against not just Iran, but Iran's alliance with Russia, Turkey, and North Korea. And that's the two worlds that we're seeing, two alliances that are forming, and we better build a strong alliance against it.
All right, I've got about 6 minutes here to get the two questions I've got to ask you before we let you go get answers to. Number one, you mentioned the Abrahamic Accords. Can you give our audience just a historical perspective of just how unprecedented these are? the notion of Israel and Saudi Arabia normalizing relations. I mean, just what that historically signifies, Joel.
Okay, so first, the Saudis aren't there yet, but they're trending that way. I have had two-hour meetings with the Saudi crown prince, me, an Israeli, a Jew, a follower of Jesus. I know that's a lot of identities, but he welcomed me and asked me to bring evangelical leaders to meet with him, not once, but twice, and all of his senior inner circle. Okay, that's a huge development. But back to the Abraham Accords, these are huge deals. We have not seen an Arab-Israeli peace deal before these in 25 years. Okay, an entire generation went by and no Arab country would make peace with Israel. There were only two before, and they were both done by Democrats. One was, of course, the Egyptian peace treaty with Israel in 1979, and then Bill Clinton helping to broker the Jordanian-Israeli peace accord in 1994. Then nothing for 25 years. President Trump, a Republican, 4 peace deals in his final months in office. And look, all of the people that are involved, including President Trump, deserve a Nobel Peace Prize for what they did. It's huge. And I've got a book coming out in the fall called Enemies and Allies. We can talk about that more later, but that goes into the inside story of the changing dynamic and just how historic this really is. And I think the Saudis are coming.
That brings us to the final question. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to discuss. The transition we're seeing now, I really think this is the third term of Obama. So I've been calling it O'Biden. That if you wondered if Obama had gotten a third term or if he just ran now, given where the Democratic Party is now compared to 2008, I think that's pretty much what we're going to see from Joe Biden. What does that mean from a foreign policy perspective? How does that impact some of the momentum that you were just describing?
Well, okay, try to keep it concise. Steve, I think you're absolutely right on domestic and economic and social policy. Biden is going to be horrible for anybody who's Christian, evangelical, pro-life, pro-traditional biblical marriage, whatever. Disaster. And the economy, bad. On foreign policy, we're going to have to watch. I'm not sure yet. I'm skeptical, but I don't want to be a cynic. I think Biden has some differences with regards to Israel. Obama was a train wreck with Israel, a train wreck. But Biden, historically, he calls himself a Zionist, pro-Israel. He's much warmer. Now, if he makes a terrible deal with Iran, like he is signaling he might, then this will be horrible. But if he's tougher with Iran than his predecessor, if he and his team have learned some things, we'll see, okay? Right now, he just said this week that he's not going to remove sanctions on Iran until Iran stops enriching uranium past, where they were supposed to begin with. If he sticks to that, that's good. If he gets tough with Putin, that's good. If he gets tough with Recep Erdogan, the dictator emerging in Turkey, that would be good. So let's see. I'm cautious and I'm concerned, but I'm not yet ready to say it's going to be a disaster. But we'll see. You may end up being right. I hope you're not.
Well, I hope you are. I did see what he said over the weekend about not coming back to the table with Iran because he was pretty adamant during the campaign about wanting to renew the Iran deal. That kind of surprised me. So I hope that you turn out to be right about that. Good to see you, brother. Always good to see you. Thanks for joining us, all right?